In this session, I'm going to share an often overlooked mental practice that can boost your training results: the mind-muscle connection. Rather than letting your mind wander, I want you to learn how to direct your attention toward the muscle you're working, to feel it contract and control the movement. Over the next few minutes, I'll explain what the mind-muscle connection is, why it matters, the science behind attentional focus and motor activation, how internal and external cues affect performance, and the research exploring whether more activation really equals more growth. We'll also cover practical techniques to improve body awareness and look at ingredients that may enhance focus. By the end of this talk, you'll understand when and how to use the mind-muscle connection to get stronger and more intentional with every rep. Before we dive into the science, let me give you a roadmap. We'll start with a hook and framing to ground the concept in your experience. Then I'll discuss the science of activation, how your brain recruits motor units, and what surface electromyography can tell us. After that, we'll ask whether more activation actually leads to more muscle growth, review key research studies and theories, and examine where and when the mind-muscle connection is most helpful. We'll then move into practical techniques you can use right away in the gym, followed by a quick overview of supplements and focus ingredients that might support mental clarity. Finally, I'll wrap up with a conclusion to tie everything together and leave you with actionable takeaways. Let's define the mind-muscle connection. When people talk about MMC, they mean consciously directing your attention toward the specific muscle you want to work during an exercise. Instead of just moving the weight, you mentally feel the muscle contract and lengthen. This approach emphasizes an internal focus, attending to sensations within your body rather than an external focus on the weight or environment. The idea stems from motor learning research, showing that attentional focus can alter the amplitude of electromyography signals, which measure the electrical activity of working muscles. Higher EMG amplitude suggests greater motor unit recruitment and firing rates, meaning more muscle fibers are engaged. However, it's important to remember that EMG represents neural drive, not mechanical output, so the relationship between increased EMG and muscle growth is more complex than it appears. Why should you care about the mind-muscle connection? There are several potential benefits. First, internal focus can increase activation of specific muscles at moderate loads, helping you bring up lagging body parts or rebalance imbalances. Second, when you concentrate on the contraction, you often slow down the tempo and control the movement, which improves technique and reduces momentum. Third, developing body awareness makes you mindful of which muscles are working and when other muscles take over, leading to smarter programming and injury prevention. In other words, learning to feel your muscles can enhance both form and function. Next, we'll look at the underlying science of attention and motor activation to better understand how this works. To understand how attentional focus influences performance, we need to look at motor activation. During resistance exercise, your brain sends descending signals to motor neurons that innervate muscle fibers. These neurons activate groups of fibers called motor units. An internal focus can modulate the recruitment and firing frequency of these motor units, potentially engaging more of them. Surface electromyography, or EMG, records the electrical activity generated by these active motor units. Higher EMG amplitude generally reflects greater recruitment, higher firing rates, or increased synchronization, which we interpret as greater neural drive. But it's important to remember that EMG is a measure of neural input, not mechanical output. A higher EMG reading doesn't necessarily mean more tension in the muscle or greater force production. A motor unit consists of a single motor neuron and all the muscle fibers it innervates. Your nervous system recruits these units according to the size principle. Smaller, slow-twitch units are activated first, and as force demands rise, larger, fast-twitch units are progressively called into action. By focusing on a specific muscle during an exercise, you might bias recruitment toward the targeted units, but this doesn't override the fundamental recruitment order. Heavy loads will still follow the size principle, no matter how focused you are. It's also worth noting that even when you're consciously contracting a muscle, synergist muscles and connective tissues contribute to the movement. Understanding this hierarchy helps you appreciate what attentional cues can and can't accomplish. Attentional focus can be internal or external, and each has distinct effects. An internal focus means directing your attention to the sensation of a specific muscle contracting. For example, telling yourself to squeeze your pecs during a bench press. An external focus involves concentrating on the movement outcome or the environment, such as driving the bar to the ceiling. Research shows internal cues often increase EMG amplitude of the targeted muscle but may reduce overall performance, possibly because they constrain the motor system. External cues tend to improve movement efficiency, power, and coordination, leading to better performance. The choice between internal and external cues should therefore depend on your goals, the exercise, and the load you're using. Let's look at some research. Poway and colleagues conducted a study on the bench press to examine how verbal instructions influence muscle activation. When participants were instructed to focus on their triceps, EMG activity of the long head increased significantly at both 50% and 80% of their 1 rep max. In contrast, cues to focus on the chest only modestly increased pectoralis activation, and only at lighter loads. This suggests it's easier to selectively increase activation of a secondary muscle like the triceps than a primary mover like the chest, and that the effects are more pronounced at moderate loads. Understanding these nuances can help you apply focus cues more effectively during your workouts. Other researchers have expanded on these findings. In follow-up studies by Calatayud and colleagues, internal cues were tested across different loads and speeds. They found that focusing on the target muscle increased EMG by up to about 6% for the pectoralis and 4% for the triceps when lifting 50 to 60% of your 1 rep max with a controlled tempo. However, when participants lifted explosively or used heavy loads around 80% of 1 rep max, the attentional effects disappeared. Mechanical demands dominated neural strategies. Interestingly, focusing on a secondary muscle sometimes increased the EMG of the primary muscle without decreasing activity elsewhere, suggesting that attentional cues can alter neural drive in complex ways. A systematic review of the literature reveals several key patterns. First, internal cues reliably boost EMG amplitude at low to moderate loads, but they don't have much effect when the weight is heavy. Second, external focus often results in lower EMG readings yet superior performance due to more efficient movement patterns. The constrained action hypothesis proposes that internal focus constrains the motor system and disrupts automatic coordination, whereas external focus frees up automatic processes. Additionally, the effects of attentional cues depend on the exercise type, such as isolation versus compound movements, the experience level of the lifter, and the complexity of the cue. Most importantly, increased EMG does not necessarily translate to greater hypertrophy. Long-term data linking internal focus to muscle growth are limited. A common question is whether more muscle activation actually leads to more growth. EMG reflects neural drive, not muscle tension. High EMG can accompany low mechanical loading if a muscle is producing force inefficiently. At present, we don't have conclusive evidence linking internal focus to greater hypertrophy. Studies that have measured long-term muscle growth are limited and often show no significant advantage. Conversely, external focus may allow lifters to handle heavier loads or perform more volume, indirectly promoting growth despite lower EMG readings. Ultimately, focus cues are just one tool in your training toolbox. Progressive overload, proper mechanics, sufficient volume, and adequate recovery remain the primary drivers of muscle gain. So when does the mind-muscle connection actually help? The evidence suggests that focusing on the target muscle is most beneficial during isolation exercises like biceps curls and leg extensions, where you can deliberately contract the muscle without much interference from other muscle groups. It can also be helpful when you're trying to bring up a lagging muscle or re-establish neural pathways for a muscle that's hard to feel. Internal focus tends to have the biggest impact at light to moderate loads below about 60% of your 1 rep max, where you can control the movement and feel the contraction. Beginners may also benefit from learning to feel their muscles before progressing to heavier, more complex lifts. On the other hand, there are times when you're better off using an external focus. Heavy compound lifts like squats, deadlifts, and presses require maximal force and stability. So focusing on the movement outcome, pushing through the floor or driving the bar overhead, often enhances performance and safety. Explosive or athletic movements like sprinting, jumping, and Olympic lifts benefit from external cues to optimize coordination and power. When you're learning a complex motor skill, external focus helps build automaticity more effectively than trying to micromanage individual muscles. Even under fatigue or high stress, external focus can reduce perceived effort and allow you to maintain volume or intensity. Here are some practical techniques to improve your mind-muscle connection. First, slow down the tempo. Controlled eccentrics and pauses at peak contraction give you time to feel the muscle working. Second, lighten the load until you can deliberately contract the target muscle without compensating with other muscles or using momentum. Third, use touch cues by lightly tapping or massaging the muscle between sets to reinforce proprioceptive awareness. Finally, incorporate short-range of motion drills like partial reps or isometric holds at points of peak tension. These can wake up stubborn muscles and make it easier to feel them during full-range movements. Experiment with these strategies and note which ones help you connect with your muscles. Your environment and mindset play a big role in how well you can focus on your muscles. Whenever possible, control your training environment. Minimize distraction. Choose music that helps you concentrate and maintain a consistent setup, so you don't have to adjust your stance or grip each time. Breathing is another overlooked component. Synchronize your breath with each repetition and practice deep diaphragmatic breathing to improve focus and stabilization. Visualization is a powerful tool. Before a set, imagine the muscle contracting and the path the movement will follow. This primes your neural circuits for the task. Finally, avoid ego lifting. Chasing numbers at the expense of form undermines the mind-muscle connection. Focus on quality reps over maximal loads. Some pre-workout formulas claim to enhance the mind-muscle connection by boosting alertness and concentration. In the next few slides, we'll examine the evidence for common ingredients such as caffeine, L-Tyrosine, alpha-GPC, and Huperzine A. I'll explain how each compound affects neural drive and cognitive function, and whether these effects might help you sustain an internal focus during training. Remember, focus ingredients can complement your training, but they're not magic bullets. It's important to consider the overall quality of a supplement, dosage, and your individual tolerance. With that context in mind, let's begin with the most familiar stimulant, caffeine. Caffeine is probably the most widely used performance enhancer in the world. It primarily works by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain, which increases arousal, reduces perceived effort, and tunes the gain of your motor system. This leads to increased corticospinal excitability and altered motor unit recruitment, making it easier to recruit more fibers and maintain higher firing rates. However, caffeine doesn't directly make your muscles stronger. It's more about reducing fatigue and sharpening the signal from the brain to the muscles. Typical effective doses range from about 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, taken 30 to 60 minutes before training. But tolerance, genetics, and side effects vary, so you need to find the right dose for you. Tyrosine is an amino acid that serves as a precursor for the catecholamines, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Under stressful or cognitively demanding conditions, your brain can deplete these neurotransmitters, leading to fatigue and reduced focus. Supplementing with L-tyrosine has been shown to improve working memory, task switching, and response inhibition in young adults during challenging tasks. The benefits are most pronounced when you're under stress, sleep-deprived, or multitasking. They're less noticeable when your catecholamine reserves are already sufficient. Typical doses range from 1 to 2 grams taken about an hour before intense cognitive or physical activity. As with any supplement, start with the lower end of the range and monitor how you feel. Alpha-GPC is a choline-containing compound that crosses the blood-brain barrier and supports acetylcholine synthesis. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter involved in memory, learning, and neuromuscular function. Research suggests that alpha-GPC may enhance cognitive performance by boosting cholinergic signaling. In athletic contexts, supplementation has been reported to prevent declines in choline during prolonged exercise, increase lower body power output, and even stimulate growth hormone secretion. Typical doses range from 300 to 600 milligrams taken 30 to 60 minutes before exercise. As always, look for products that specify the amount of pure alpha-GPC and avoid proprietary blends that obscure individual ingredient doses. Huperzine A is an alkaloid extracted from Chinese club moss that's used clinically as an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor in China for Alzheimer's disease. In the United States, it is not approved as a dietary supplement ingredient, although it can be found in some nootropic and pre-workout blends. Currently, there's no reliable evidence that Huperzine A enhances cognitive performance in healthy individuals. Most positive data come from studies on Alzheimer's or vascular dementia, which don't translate to healthy athletes. There are also safety concerns. Side effects include decreased heart rate, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, and blurred vision. Multi-ingredient products may also contain undeclared substances or inconsistent dosing. Approach Huperzine A with caution or avoid it entirely. So do these focus ingredients actually enhance the mind-muscle connection? Cognitive stimulants can certainly increase alertness, reduce mental fatigue, and sharpen concentration, which may help you maintain an internal focus during training. However, no studies have directly linked pre-workout focus ingredients to increased muscle hypertrophy via the mind-muscle connection. Supplements should complement, not replace, evidence-based training principles, progressive overload, sufficient volume, proper nutrition, and adequate recovery. When evaluating any ingredient, consider the credibility of the source, the dosage used in studies, and the potential side effects. Being informed empowers you to make choices that support your goals without falling for marketing hype. Let's wrap up. The mind-muscle connection is a valuable tool for enhancing body awareness and targeting weak muscles, especially during isolation exercises or when working with lighter loads. Internal focus can increase EMG activity, but heavy lifts and explosive movements still benefit from external cues that optimize coordination and power. Remember that increased EMG amplitude doesn't guarantee muscle growth. Progressive overload, mechanical tension, and recovery remain the primary drivers of hypertrophy. Cognitive supplements may help you concentrate, but they're not magic bullets. Base your training and supplement use on solid evidence, quality products, and your individual needs. Train hard, stay intentional, and enjoy the process of becoming stronger.